So here to help us make sense of all of it is Brendan Caldwell from Caldwell Securities Limited. Welcome, Brendan. Thanks so much for being here.
Bill, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So when it comes to finances, it just freaks a lot of people out. And so what do followers of Jesus need to know about financial freedom, and why do you think so many people find themselves in difficulty?
Well, borrow from C.S. Lewis for a minute. In his book, The Last Battle, the donkey puzzle says, I'm not a very clever donkey, as a reason for why he did all the things that he did. And one of the children says to him, maybe so, but it's important to try and be as clever as one can. So I think the first thing is that many people feel that they're just not very clever at that. Okay, but we are called upon to be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves, not as vicious as snakes and stupid as pigeons. So what are and with apologies to Preston Manning for that quote, but I think to use one's common sense, which may not be as common as the name might imply, would be, I think, very helpful. Christians in particular are prone to fads, hearing what people like me say on television and go off in one direction or another. There are some simple and straightforward ways, biblical ways, that one can look after one's finances in a sensible, reasonable way. And happy to chat about some of those.
Yeah, you're right. You know, as a pastor, again, I have to combat this common misconception in the church that money is bad, right? Money is evil. And you often quote the scripture, the root of all evil is money, which isn't actually the scripture. But how do you help people navigate this idea that money is just like a tool. It's not evil. It's amoral. What do you think about that?
Well, nothing is neither good or bad unless it isn't given over to God.
Good.
And this is something I've only taken. I mean, I've had a good working relationship with God for a very long time. I became a Christian at 3 or 4 years old as a conscious decision. But only in the last several years have I realized how little I'd actually turned over to God, that I hadn't really trusted God with relationships or my finances. So it's I think on the one hand, a conscious effort or conscious decision I think one needs to make to turn these over to God. On the other hand, there are some good biblical principles that one can apply that I don't know if they're common sense, but take, for example, the lending of money to friends or colleagues or people who ask. I would never lend anybody money.
Right.
I'll give them money. So if somebody comes to me and asks to loan them, I don't pick a number, $10,000. No, I won't lend you $10,000 because that will create a barrier in our relationship if you can't pay me back. I'll give you $1,000. Again, picking numbers out of the air. And please don't ever feel you have to pay back. You want to donate it to somebody at some point as a way of repaying? Great. But if never lend people money more than you'd be prepared to actually give them. It's just one of those things that people get caught up on.
Well, I love that, because what you're really talking about is getting to the heart of it. And money really is a tool, and it exposes the heart. And I think you're right. I think the way you combat that is by, like you said so eloquently, by just turning it over to God, trusting God with your money. Okay, so that's great. But we live in a world that's very complicated for a lot of people. And so the stock markets, they're kind of a foreign space, foreign territory for people that bring a lot of fear. So what can you tell us about understanding the stock markets and what's happening in right now in 2022?
The stock market, understood the way it was really meant to be, is a way that everybody in our society can participate in the best ideas of a nation that has to offer. So Canada's best companies are Canada's best business ideas. So when you participate in the stock market, that's what you're participating in. And it gets all the hype and all the everything, that gets lost. So whether you're buying Royal Bank or Shopify or some mining or energy or tech company, you're buying into an idea. Now, the best way to do that, particularly for someone who's never invested before, is slowly. If you have amount of money, let's say you have $100,000, don't invest $100,000 today in the stock market. Invest $10,000, a portion of it. And then next week or next month or next quarter, probably next month or next quarter, look at investing the next 10,000. Dollar cost averaging, it's not a biblical system. It's least as old as the book, The Wealthy Barber. Right. But just putting a fixed amount of money away every month allows you to take advantage of whether those best ideas are in favor or out of favor with a phrase called dollar cost averaging.
Well, man, that's actually really powerful. When you think about it, you're investing in ideas. And so find ideas that are worth investing in. So, okay, let's just talk biblically again for a second. Okay, so where does tithing fit into all of that? When we're talking about investing in your mind, what's a way, what does that do? How does it help? What should people think about?
Well, one of the brilliant ways you can use the stock market to tithe is that if you have stocks on which you have a significant gain, you can donate that to a charity, to your church, to a cause. And if it's a charitable institution like a charity, you can donate that stock at a gain and not actually have to pay the capital gains tax. So if you've bought a stock for 5,000 and it's now worth 10,000, you can donate that to your church, get the entire 10,000 as a tax credit, and then you don't have to pay the capital gains tax. So there are interesting ways that one can use the stock market to actually tithe.
Right, and as you're talking, I just think of the parable of the talents, of course, and we all been given something, and we're actually all responsible with that something to make a difference in the world, and that's great. Now, one thing that a lot of people are worried about right now, especially, is inflation. So what should people be afraid of it? What should they do to counter it?
Well, inflation, which is the prices on assets, goods, services going up, is better than deflation. Because inflation means that people today think that something that they're buying today is going to be more costly tomorrow. So they're looking to buy it today. If they don't think it's going to be worth more tomorrow, think it's going to be worth less, then they won't buy it today. And people tend to hoard money in those situations. So inflation is better for an economy than deflation. But we've already actually had a lot of inflation, largely because interest rates are so low. And if it doesn't cost very much to borrow, people will borrow as much as they can to buy largely what they've bought as assets. So part of the reason we've seen the stock market up so much, or housing prices, or the price of Canadian art or French wines, all these assets have gone up, largely because interest rates are so low. So we've seen asset inflation. What we're seeing now is the inflation, the rise in prices in both goods and services that people buy on a daily basis. And that's what I think is causing concern.
So if I could summarize what we've talked so far in this first part, we're going to come back in just a minute, is trust God, invest wisely, right? And don't be afraid. God's got it. And I think that's fantastic. Well, yeah, thank you. We're going to come right back in just a minute to discuss what 2022 might have in store for some of us as we continue in our discussion with Brendan Caldwell. We'll be right back.